Hey, it's so good to have you with us tonight, and it's great to have so many wonderful guests tonight. This next guest is not a stranger to us. I want you to give him a good welcome, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that have transitioned in his life. Now, many of you may have seen the news across the country about a very tragic bus accident with a group of young people from a wonderful church here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Some of those young people lost their lives in that accident. Some of them are still hospitalized, and we're praying for their recovery and for their parents. This young man was pastor of that church, actually founder of that church, and has transitioned in his ministry, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But the first thing we want to talk about is that outpouring, really, of prayer and love that you have seen. I know that you've seen from across the country. You know, when you go through a tragic situation like this, Pastor, it really is easy to see that the body of Christ is alive and well. And you have seen that, I know, in an outpouring of love toward Metro Church and toward these families and toward these young people.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable, Mike. And I want to thank you personally and Covenant Church and all the pastor friends all over the country, and thousands and hundreds of thousands of Christians who prayed, and many of them emailed and sent cards and letters. And, you know, I guess, you know, Mike, you're a pastor, and, you know, we had over 100 kids that were going to camp, and, you know, I was headed down to my office and got a phone call from the youth pastor, and I knew they were late getting off, and I said, did you guys finally get on the road? And there was just dead silence, Mike. And our youth pastor, just a powerful young man of God, said, Pastor, there's been a terrible tragedy, and one of our buses has crashed. And then he said something I'll never forget, Mike. He said, Pastor, I think there are some kids that aren't going to make it. And you can imagine, you know, boy, my heart just stopped. And I began to pray, and then he told me their location. They were about 35 minutes outside of Dallas, and I turned the car around literally in the middle of the road, put the hazard lights on, picked up two of our associates, and we went. And Mike, boy, it was like something out of a movie. It was so surreal, you know. I got there, and of course, you know, there were police officers who did such an unbelievable job. It was, and really exercised gifts of mercy, and the media was there, and then the parents began to arrive. And of course, 4 of those kids went out into eternity. But I want to tell you this, Mike, that those 4 kids loved Jesus with all their heart. And I wish that you could have known them. I wish the whole body of Christ, of course we will, one day we'll be together in heaven, but they were so full of the life of Jesus. And one little girl in particular who had just been saved recently, and because we have so many teenagers saved in our youth ministry, and she had given her life to Christ, and she was on the drill team at her high school, and just bringing all of her friends and her family members to Christ. And of course, in the aftermath, even though it's tragic, and it's been very difficult for our congregation, but I have seen I've seen Jesus. You know, I've seen Jesus in the midst of the tragedy, and through our church, through the body of Christ at large. And then in the aftermath, over 200 people gave their lives to Christ in funerals where we just preached the gospel and had people stand up, you know, to give their lives to Christ. And the first memorial service, it was unbelievable. I was in the middle of just talking about Jesus, and kids just began to get up and come forward and say, Pastor, I want to get saved right now. And then the opportunity to preach the gospel to the nation, literally because of the media and because of the story. You know, we serve a God, and I don't know why all this happened. You know, I know, Mike, that God is sovereign, and I know that there's not a bird that falls from the air that God doesn't know about. I also know there's an enemy. I know the reality of the devil, and I know he seeks to kill and steal and destroy. I know we live in a cursed earth, and terrible things happen to people who love Jesus every day. But I'm so thankful that we serve a God who even in the midst of tragedy can bring something powerful. And literally hundreds of people have been saved as a result of the deaths of those 4 teenagers. And to God be the glory. I know that they're rejoicing right now.
Sure, and we will continue to pray.